Welcome everyone to Season 2, Episode 5 of Commerce Corner, the podcast by Lula Commerce. In this season, we're talking technology roadmaps and how retailers are approaching digital transformations like online ordering, loyalty programs, and large-scale AI projects. We've got a really great conversation lined up for you today with Brian Trout. Brian is a C-store guru. He's helped build some of the most well-known brands in the space, and he's most recently been involved with the Greater Houston Retailers Association. So Brian, we're super happy to have you on the podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Of course, and I'm joined in hosting today's podcast by the co-host, Adit Gupta, co-founder and CEO of Lula Commerce. Welcome, Adit, and I'll pass the mic to you, sir, to begin the questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. This is such an exciting episode. Brian, thank you again for taking the time to have this incredible conversation we've been looking forward to for so long. I want to first hit you with a curveball. You've been at some of the most iconic brands that we've heard of here in Greater North America. What led you to work in this industry and, more importantly, stay in the industry?
Oh, goodness, that's a good question. I had an internship with Amoco Oil Company in college, and it led to an opportunity to join the management training program. I had a BBA in school, which was a little bit of education in all functions, in the business world. And back then in the, late 80s, early 90s, the company allowed us great flexibility in running convenience stores and operating them. And I got to flex a bunch of different muscles that were, kind of strong coming out of college, but not really well developed. And I got to test a bunch of ideas and theories. And, it's just a very dynamic, ever-changing world. And every day in the store was different. And, it got in my blood and I loved it. Very much so. Yeah. So 30 plus years of it.
Ryan, you're one of the most humble operators I've ever met. You're 30 plus years. You've held all sort of figures of authority from P&L ownership from brands like BP to Yesway to GPM to GHRA. Like most of these brands are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sites, and you've scaled them from very few stores to many stores, and you've had this sort of career of repeating this over and over and over again with different brands from scaling very successful retail organizations. And I want to pinpoint maybe what is the common thread that's connected across these experiences where you're able to help a brand with a few locations eventually scale up to many more.
That's a good question. All right. I think the common thread along all of it is understanding the consumer and being able to grow the customer base. When I was a young man, I said I was at Amoco, and I spent a couple of years in interning with them in school, and then 5 years after school. And I got recruited to go to work for a company called Thornton Oil Company. This was back in the year 2000, right after the turn of the century or millennium. And I got to work with Mr. Jim Thornton and Matt Thornton, and there were a couple other heavy hitters in the industry today that were there at the time. But Jim Thornton had this premise. He goes, if you can keep your customers growing, that's a winning business model. And coming out of Amoco, it was resource rich and retail deficient, right? It was all about fuel and it was about selling gas. And Thornton's was a completely different model of volume. This is when Quick Trip QT was growing rapidly, and Thornton's and kind of the rear lot dive-in format, 4,000, 5,000 square foot buildings were becoming commonplace in the industry. And I think it's having a model that grows the customer base is the most critical part of
And
being able to
I love
attract
that.
it.
As you double click, you want to keep the customer growing. I mean, there's so many threads there. It's the customer satisfaction, loyalty, retention. Um, but the thread that I want to pull on specifically is um, how do you build a brand that's true to your consumer? Because a lot of the brands that you've mentioned are geographically in very different places. So how have you adapted to know the consumer and the nuances of that consumer and the variations presented by geographic diversity? Has have you ever considered it from that angle? It's like I want to serve different consumers differently because of the where they are geographically.
I think I think most of the consumers are very similar in the fact that they're on the go, they're looking to solve a need. There was a light bulb that went off early in my career. Everybody that comes into the store is there to buy something, right? And most everything in that store, you either smoke, drink, or eat, right? There's a handful of items, but everything else is a consumable. Um, and so then it's trying to match the product assortment to the consumer type that you see coming in. And there's a variety of those. Um, Early on, when an organization is growing, they may not have the resources to fully understand the segmentation and what that means. But fortunately, over the course of my year, I have had great fortune to work with some really smart people and some large organizations that had some resources that use those resources to bring those strategic insights and consumer insights to bear. And over time, you learn, you understand, and it enables you as an operator to kind of have a gut feeling about how to go forward, right, with a product assortment and what a consumer is looking for. Food and drink is a huge one, and for 15 years that's been happening, right? Tobacco and fuel has been regulated, overregulated quite a bit, and um, it's been under attack from a taxation point of view, and consumers have been shifting to this on-the-go food lifestyle, and for 20 years that's been a marching plan of the industry is how to bring food forward and relevant in the marketplace. And so, ever-changing menus and product types that are consumed has been the rage. You try a lot of different things, 30, 40% stick, you know, and the rest are learnings that you gain along the way. Does that answer your
And
question?
it does, and it sounds like there's a lot of commonalities, but amongst consumers, but you've always leaned on data, and you've always sort of segmented based on raw data. And I double clicking on that one unique experience that is just so impressive, where you've helped scale this brand Yesway that millions of consumers know in the United States. It's from a concept to over 150 stores in 3 years. So, what was the unique insight that you had that led you to that outcome? And more importantly, what did any learnings from an infrastructural perspective that you learned from that experience?
Um, Scaling from 0 to 150 was a lot of work. All acquisitions, no new builds, right? The model for the PE group was M&A roll-up strategy, right? Um, and they hired me to execute that strategy. Once we raised the money, we went out and did that. And so we're looking for a core operation to launch from. Something that would bring the basics of the infrastructure to bear, right? Back office system, some technology that could be expanded or easily replaced, right? But the key was to have some assets, fuel distribution, and cash on cash return for the first purchase. And we started with a 10-store outfit in Iowa. The infrastructure that came along was enough for keeping the wheels on the bus, so to speak, but it was not fit for the fight long term to grow to 150. We knew we needed to invest and improve upon that infrastructure. And the key to growing that infrastructure was, one, having people on the team that understood it, right? So that was kind of why they hired me. And 20 years at that time, 20 years at that time in the industry, and bringing others on board that also had intelligence and experience in the industry to make the acquisition and the integration easier, or as easy as it can be. It's never really easy. It's a lot of hard work. And then making sure that you scale appropriately in the costs so that you're not over investing too early. I mean, there's a certain amount of over investment early on in the cycle to get a back office platform that can support growth from 20 to 150 stores in a few years. You've got to build that organizational strength up front. So there was some early investment in that, and then you got to rapidly catch up from a store count perspective.
What do you think was the most important operational investment in those early days that helped you have really tight operations as you were acquiring more and more brands?
Strong integration team. Somebody that putting together a group of folks that go in and understand the people, the market, peel the onion, if you will, on the acquired stores operations, bring a supportive culture to it, right? So a lot of these folks that we acquired were 5, 10 stores, limited upside, if you will, from a career growth within that organization. And then we bring in opportunity to grow and develop through a changing business model and an expanding store set for these folks. And, the key is to make sure that you love on the new members of the family, if you will, train, develop, encourage, show them kind of the guardrails of the operation, and then get out of the way and let them do what they do best. They know their customers. Their customers are curious, who's this new group coming in? How are they going to change my daily routine with their behaviors or their product assortment, etc. And most good operators today, they take time before they start re-imaging and remodeling stores. They don't just come in and drop a new coat of paint, on the store immediately. They try to understand what's going on and then meld the best of both operations into the consumer offer. So at Yesway, I was fortunate enough to hire a couple of folks that I had worked with at the pantry back in the day, before Circle K acquired them. And this one lady was just phenomenal at going in and making friends and becoming an expert on the way they operate currently, and then helping us bridge, what we want to be in the future to the way things were on the street, and integrating, right? And that was a huge, huge key. She was incredibly beneficial.
I have so many more questions about integration team. What are their SOPs? But without diving into the rabbit hole, one item tangent that I want to chat about is something that every brand that sells gas is likely experiencing today in April 2026, which is
Mm.
this disruption of one of the items they sell, gas. And 30 days into the conflict, there's continued uncertainty of predictable supply chain. And I'm wondering, from purely a P&L standpoint and operation standpoint, what do you feel like brands are experiencing of likely of different size? And then if just curious what insight you might have on this topic.
Oh, that's a really good question, and something a lot of people are probably banging their head on the wall about right now. The supply disruption is huge, and it's obviously driving up fuel. It's on the news every night, talking about it. I read an article just the other day that Florida is now one of the most expensive states for gasoline, and it's all because they don't have any refinery supply. They have to go out and outbid other states and organizations for the supply. And this is going to become, or is, a challenge for a lot of operators. Um, if you're with a brand, what we call a major oil brand, there's generally supply available. They might put you on allocation, and you can have only 80% of it, depending on how much is available from their refinery footprint and distribution and exchange agreements. But if you're an unbranded supplier, right, this is a market that could get inverted very quickly, where the unbranded fuel is going to be higher than the branded, just depending on how the levers are pulled. To an operational person, right? You're trying to acquire fuel. You need the fuel. If you don't have fuel, that's going to be a problem. So that behavior is going to drive price. From a retail operations perspective, you can only do what you can do, right? Retailers are going to pass on the cost slowly. They don't want to pass it on as fast. There's this, uh, we're the end of the value chain in retail. So historically we've been, hesitant to pass it on to the consumers, but we have to, because it was a key part of the P&L for retail operators. So the old saying is you go up like a rocket ship and you flow down like a feather, right? And when you go up like a rocket ship, demand wanes. It's been waning for a while now, anyway, since before COVID, um, and it's now really about what's happening inside the store for the rest of the products. Right? The product assortment. Are you selling premium products? If you are selling premium products, you might start adding more middle of the road or private label products or lower end products, right? Because consumers are pinched economically. It feels to me very much like it did in '08 with the market crash, and how we had to shift into budget brands. And that's, just means lower economic brands. And that was a really big jumping off point for private label products, become very ubiquitous. Um, and I think it has a lot to do now with retailers trying to um, figure out how to defray costs, how to meet the consumer where they are, which drives, your business operations, right? And this e-commerce and a remote delivery, that is going to be huge. So it is huge, and it's ever growing. And I think retailers are leaning in on that kind of stuff ever more, right? Particularly independent retailers are starting to come to realize that they have to flex these merchandising muscles. They have to bring IT to bear to be able to compete with, the bigger brands.
Hmm. That's right. It's so fascinating what you just said, Brian, that the '08 financial crisis was likely a catalyst for brands to think about a private label strategy. And there's so much to unpack there. Um, do you think that there are other such interventions now in 2026 that as brands are trying to bulletproof their P&L and reduce reliance on like a shrinking cents per gallon world, that retailers might think about different things. Whether use e-commerce is certainly one of them to grow the P&L, white private label offering. Are there other things that operators should just have on the back of their mind in their overall operational and service roadmap?
Uh, well, the basics are you got to be clean, you got to be in stock, and you got to be friendly, right? And so if your service model is not friendly, that is going to be a problem for consumers. They're not going to come in there, consumers are seeing prices skyrocket all over the place, so they understand it and they make choices, but they do love the connectivity with their daily routine and the friends that they make in these convenience stores. I mean, they become like family. Um, and as long as you're driving that consumer back, right, your average retail is probably going up, but your items in the basket might be going down because you know, disposable income is being sucked out by the rising cost of fuel. I think
Mm-hmm.
retailers need to recognize that, they have to stay profitable to be able to stay in the game and manage, their cost structure. There are ways and to lower some of these operational costs, and that's with the advent of IA and this agentic AI particularly, and it is a fast evolving, quickly growing platform that is going to penetrate damn near every angle of our business, from replenishment to inventory analysis to consumer behavior to analyzing the conversations that go on between the consumer and the person behind the register, to how to understanding how a consumer responds to frictionless checkout or any kind of technology that can speed checkout, to their responses on the forecourt when they stick a nozzle in the tank and they go, "Dad gum, I can't believe how much this is costing me." These conversations are being captured and managed for impact tomorrow. So I think embracing the technology, not being afraid of it, is going to be a huge enabler. And I think the folks that are adopting that stuff sooner rather than later are at an advantage. But at the end of the day, you got to be
Mm-hmm.
able to pay your bills and keep your customers happy. And that's kind of the first and foremost need.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of good ideas generated. I think that a lot of them root in the simple things, and completely agree on how AI is disrupting the convenience retail space in the US, and we're seeing it working with brands of all size.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting, particularly independent brands. I think that you're one of the few operators that's had tremendous experience working with both large, well-known branded companies as well as smaller independents at GHRA. So I'd love to talk kind of into that experience, maybe for everyone's benefit, if you can explain what is the Greater Houston Retailer Cooperative Association, what's the mission, and how uh, does that type of a model work?
It definitely can work. So, the Greater Houston Retailer Association Cooperative is a aggregate buying club, basically. It is a faith-based organization, and you have to be of a particular faith and genealogy, I guess, to qualify to be in that cooperative. But there are a ton of cooperatives across North America. And it's basically scaling operations for the betterment of its members. And then it passes any retained profits on to the members in the form of, a patronage payment. So the idea is you pay a small fee to be a member annually. Uh, as a member, you give the company the right to negotiate supply agreements on your store's behalf. And so that really amounts to the cold vault and all of the pack bev products that go in there, and the promotional
Yeah.
activities that happen monthly. And so there were 2,200 locations across the greater Houston area, Southeast Texas, fourth largest DMA in America, and had over half the convenience stores, or maybe just under half the convenience stores as a member of the community and the cooperative. So very relevant to the vendors, but everybody had their own brands. And so they weren't so relevant to the consumers. And GHRA was designed to help the small independent operator be able to compete with the larger chains that have the skill and technology and intelligence and connections with decision makers at the top of the vendor chain, to help them compete. And that's really what it was. So if you think about all the south side of the P&L, all the expense lines, any one of those are free game for helping a member of GHRA defray costs. And then on the top side of the P&L, it's really about how do we help them acquire products cheaper, and grow their margin capability. We did not operate the stores for them. They were their employees. It's their asset. It was their responsibility to adopt technology. We brought programming that they could adopt to help. Some did, some didn't, and people are in a variety of places on that that spectrum of technology adoption. But we had negotiated agreements for deals, for a back office system, for technology, for service at the store, for products that go in the store for sale. We had our own warehouse that we would buy products direct from the manufacturer and self-distribute. So it was like a mini distribution. We stamped our own cigarettes, was a big deal, which means we were able to really provide cheap cigarettes to the members, relative to what they could get anywhere else from a distributor, right? And being a cooperative, the idea was to operate for a profit, but then hand those profits off back to the members in relation to how much they used the system. That was a mouthful there. Does that answer your question?
It totally does, and it's a really unique model. And some of the nuances around the distribution actually I hadn't known, so that's really fascinating. The brands that were most successful under this model, I guess, like, how did you assess performance to brands that were most successful versus brands that joined but not, unfortunately, not so successful? And specifically asked because I'm wondering if you had built any operational ways to help these independents then actually become successful.
Well, we did have ways to help struggling operators improve. We had reset teams that would come out from the warehouse and implement, kind of best in class planogramming and get the top brands into the stores and, the fast movers. We had, we developed a convenience store brand to help members that were struggling. So Kudos was the name of the company brand that we developed, licensed out to the members, and which licensed it was. We didn't sell it to them. We licensed it. It was incredibly inexpensive for them to license. The organization took on the cost of that and the support of that. We developed food service programming so that they could have hot food in the store, and we made it kind of turnkey where it could operate in a 10 by 10 environment. That was called Big Madres, tortas and tacos, and down here in Texas, that Tex-Mex is a huge driver of traffic. we developed a fuel distribution platform while I was there to, you got 2,000 stores, no seat at the gas table. I was like, hey, we really do this, and that made sense. And we helped the members get product cheaper than what they could, at least from an unbranded perspective, right? We weren't playing into brands; it was just unbranded fuel. And we did not have visibility into individual store sales and performance, right? That was not our function to track their revenue. We did understand through the commercial marketing agreements how much product was purchased from vendors, right? So it's a velocity report, not a sales report. And with 20 years in this business, you can kind of back in and understand, whether a store is performing or not performing. And we had agents from the organization that went out to work with and help members. And you would see there were groups within the co-op that were performing at a high level, and there were guys that were kind of struggling. And they all had varieties of business modeling, economic modeling for their portfolio. And if they called and asked for help, we would give it to them. But we didn't kind of penetrate into hey, we know you're struggling, let us help you, because that was not the mandate of the organization. The board of directors that oversee, the company are all members of the co-op. They have to be in the business, right? They have to own a convenience store, and they had to be of that particular faith. And so you have a unique dynamic where you've got an independent guy who's got maybe a single store, maybe 10 stores, serving as a board of director to a 2,000, 2,200 group of stores. And so as a member of the board of directors, their clique or their tribe within the 2,200 stores would come and tell them, hey, I'm struggling. I need help with this. I need help with that. And the community would kind of come together to help. And if it was of significant need, the board would call me and ask me to, take a look and see what we could do to help them.
That it sounds like a very helpful experience for independent struggling. And maybe to summarize, say if there's a independent operator listening to the segment now, would you have a list of a few bullet point items that they can take away in 2026 to explore as they try to further improve their independent store, differentiate from their competition? Maybe a few things to think about here, second half of 2026.
That's a good question. I think the biggest takeaway that I found for small operators that are actually struggling to grow their business is that they work in their business instead of on their business. It's an old cliche, right? But they're running shifts. They're in the store, and they're not able to remove themselves and look at it in a broad sense, right? They work tirelessly trying to find cheaper ways to get product, and they're spending time going to Costco and going to Walmart and going to any kind of mass merchandiser, and they'll buy product from there and then take it into their store. And while there is margin that can be gained from that, right, it is in my opinion, a waste of time when they should be thinking about the things that will move the needle in a big way, right? Service model is a huge, huge opportunity that I see in the independents. The independent, and when does an independent become a chain, right? At what scale, right? So I have seen operators grow through this to 10 to 15 to 20 to 100 stores, right? And they learn that they should not be in the store every day running a register. They need to give that responsibility to others, and they need to work on their product assortment. They need to work on the consumer experience, and they need to come up with a better um, cost management philosophy than them being the labor. And that's the biggest part, I think, that will help a small operator transition into a better oiled machine. The adoption of technology is, of course, important in leveraging the data and learning from the data. That's always very, very important.
Well said. I mean, the in the versus on the business is such a crucial thing. Sometimes even I struggle with is building a company, as any operator does. So it's important to have that awareness. We're nearing one of my favorite parts of this segment. Brian, your thinking about how to operate has been so well articulated. So thank you. And I want to pass the mic to Matt here to treat us with some lightning round questions.
Yes, this is
So,
also
are these just for me, or are we both going to answer?
just for you,
Just for
just for
you,
you.
Brian.
Okay.
Specifically curated for you. And this is one of my favorite parts as well. So basically, the lightning round will last 4 or 5 very quick questions. You can be as brief as you want in the responses, or feel free to elaborate if needed. But first question to you, Brian, is what is one line item that most operators underinvest in that ends up killing their P&L?
Training. I believe it's training, development of people. It is a huge enabler, and it underscores the individual employee's faith, if you will, in the company, and that the company has belief in them.
Yeah.
A lot of folks that don't deliver on that, or they have a training program, but it's really not fit for purpose, and they don't drive
Right.
that development.
Awesome. What's the biggest mistake you see PE firms make when they first acquire C stores?
Ooh. Over promising and under delivering. What I
Mm,
mean by that is they think they can go in there and just flip it around, right? That I can squeeze the labor out, that I can improve the margin. And they don't truly understand where the labor comes from or where the margin comes from. How does the potential acquired location generate their CPG margin? Uh, Make sure you understand where that's coming from and the cost to acquire. And can you emulate that or beat it, right? It has to be accretive. If it's not helping, then it's only lowering. And I think without the tribal knowledge or institutional knowledge of where all that comes from, you can get in trouble.
yeah,
And that cuts across any kind of PE
sure.
acquiring, not just C stores.
Awesome. We had, I think, a lot of talk in today's episode about kind of corporate chains and independents that are part of a co-op, and you've obviously been heavily involved and have run both of those. Which model do you believe wins in the long term?
Well, I think, define winning, right? I think both have a place and can survive, right? When I was a young man in Amoco, I was a dealer sales rep, and I went through this really intense training program. One day, we were all having conversations, and got in this huge debate about what does winning mean, because Amoco's whole purpose was to sell fuel to the dealers, right? Help them buy more. Their premise was get the retail price down, they'll sell more fuel. Um, Operators, some of them are happy with 10 stores. Winning doesn't mean getting an 11th store, right? And so, what does winning mean? And to a chain, Obviously that has different implications than to an entrepreneur. And so if you're advising or consulting both, right, you have to define what winning means.
Sure.
And so I
Well
think
said.
it's for both in the market. Obviously, we have roughly 2/3 of the network in America is independent operators, right?
Right.
And I don't see that fundamentally changing.
Totally.
Yep.
Next question for you. What is the single KPI that every C-store operator should look at every morning?
I'm going to go back to customer count and sales, right? If you're losing customers, that's a problem, right? So that was always a key for me. Are we maintaining or are we growing, right? Particularly in tough times. Usually, you see your customer count shifting when people's wallets are being stretched, and can you outrun the bear? The bear being the economy, the marketplace that's starting to take folks from you. It's driving customers and driving sales. Period.
Yeah.
That would be the big one you need to make sure you keep. Credit old man Thornton, Jim Thornton, for that. Yeah, he's a smart man.
Love that. Let's say the year is 2030. What does the independent C-store look like that survives?
I think the independent C store that is thriving, not just surviving, is going to be a lot further down the tech road than they are today. And they're going to leverage data. And they're going to join forces with groups in the industry that can help them, be it GHRA or SASOA or any of these other groups that help the independents flex, scale, and muscle. And the vendors are well aware of these outfits. I think surviving is going to be difficult, right? Because there's a lot of folks on the edge today. I still think the market is quite fragmented. I think M&A activity is going to continue. I think 7-Eleven and Circle K still have to grow to keep their board of directors and shareholders happy. And I think that a lot of these assets are going to be either acquired or converted to a higher and best use application as bigger, broader assets are being built in the marketplace. And kind of, the market's going to eat some of these smaller, not fit for fight purposes. So they can pivot and become last mile destinations. They can become warehouses for different distribution points, which is kind of what the C-store community is. And it's just shifting the consumer to a delivery agent, right? And so that's, if you can pivot and accept that future, I think they'll be the ones that survive.
Makes sense. Great. I think that concludes our lightning round of questions. Adit, any final thoughts or questions to close us out?
No, Brian, thank you for your time today. I think that I continue to be impressed by both the large retail change wisdom that you have to offer, but also for the independents. There's not too many people out there that are hyper focused on how 2/3 of this industry can thrive, not just survive. So thank you for being so obsessed with this space.
You're too kind. I'm very happy to have been on your show. It's my first podcast, so always learning and trying to do new things. Thank you for the time, and it's my pleasure to meet you both and be on your show.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it, and thank you to everyone tuning in today. We're available wherever you stream podcasts, so be sure to subscribe. We've got our next episode coming out in just a few short weeks, so we'll see you on the next one. Thanks again.